Dear friends, welcome to this session. We are going to talk about hello, welcome. Welcome to the discussion of all the major texts in literary theory. This is a session on theory classics. How are you? Thank you for joining us today. There are so many books that we have already discussed in our Unacademy special class on books that changed the world. Sorry. Suddenly my phone rang. Sorry. Now I've put my phone in airplane mode. Nothing will go wrong. Yeah. So I was saying that we have done theory classics in our Unacademy special books that changed the world. And Abhi, we will do more classics. And together it will be an awesome foundation for your theory studies. Shall we begin, guys? Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm starting with Psychology of the Unconscious. Do you know who wrote Psychology of the Unconscious? It is Carl Jung. Psychology of the Unconscious is a book by Carl Jung. I will highlight like this so that you will be able to see. I will read, okay? Psychology of the Unconscious is an early work of Carl Jung, first published in 1912. Remember, Psychology of the Unconscious, first published in 1912. For Jung, the unconscious is a storehouse. Jung said that the unconscious is a storehouse of repressed memories. In the unconscious, there are repressed memories. Did you understand? Memories that are not coming out, repressed. And these are specific to the individual and to our ancestral past. Memories of our ancestral past are called what, guys? Memories of our ancestral past are called collective unconscious. Collective unconscious. है ना? Now, Jung believed that the collective unconscious is expressed through archetypes, universal concepts called archetypes. Jung talked about archetypes of the collective unconscious. Archetypes can be signs, symbols, patterns of thinking, behavior. When we do certain things, some of us behave in a certain way, other people behave in another way. Why? Because we belong to different archetypes. Did you understand, guys? Jung was a contemporary of Freud, but Jung disagreed with Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung was a contemporary of Freud, but he disagreed with Sigmund Freud regarding the role of sexuality. Jung believed that the libido was not only a sexual energy, but it is a psychic energy. It is of the mind. Jung believed that the libido is a an energy of the mind. Did you understand, everyone? Regarding sexuality and libido, he disagreed with Sigmund Freud, and he believed that libido is a psychic energy, while Sigmund Freud believed that libido is a sexual energy. Got it, everyone? Now, we just talked about psychology of the unconscious. 1912. Are you ready to talk about another theory classic, guys? This was Carl Jung. The next is Course in General Linguistics, published in 1916. First, it was published in French. It was published in French and published by Charles Bolle and Albert Shahai. I am giving all these details in case some of you are beginners. Charles Bolle and Albert Shahai. And they made this book from the notes on lectures given by Ferdinand de Saussure. Ferdinand de Saussure gave lectures. Where did he lecture? At the University of Geneva. Like our Unacademy, there is the University of Geneva. There, Ferdinand de Saussure lectured, and these lectures, after his death, were published by Charles Bolle and Albert Shahai. Clear, guys? The book traces the rise and fall of historical linguistics. He actually is against historical linguistics. What do you mean by historical linguistics, guys? Historical linguistics means diachronic study. है ना? Historical linguistics means diachronic study. Saussure is against diachronic study. Saussure was trained in historical linguistics, but he is against it. Saussure is trained in historical linguistics, but instead of following historical linguistics, he supported synchronic linguistics. He supported synchrony over diachrony. Clear, everybody? The book Course in General Linguistics presents the principles of a new linguistic science. Guys, Ferdinand de Saussure was the father of linguistics. This book established linguistics. Before that, there was no linguistics. There was only philology. This book presents the principle of a new linguistic science, and he laid the foundations of semiology. Semiology. He talked about the theory of the signifier, signified, sign. All of us know. And this is the importance of this book. If in an interview, suppose you are attending an interview. In an interview, they say, can you name one important book in linguistics? You say, Course in General Linguistics by Ferdinand de Saussure. They will ask you, why is it important? You will say, because it laid the foundations of structuralism. Then they will say, no, you are wrong. Because Ferdinand de Saussure did not know structuralism. Structuralism came much after this. What was the importance of Ferdinand de Saussure's Course in General Linguistics when it was published? Tell me. And you wouldn't know perhaps. So I am telling you, you should know the most important contribution of Ferdinand de Saussure is that he replaced historical study of linguistics with a synchronic study of linguistics, and he developed the theory of semiotics. Thus, he became the father of the modern science linguistics. Before that, there was only philology. For the first time, linguistics came into being because of Ferdinand de Saussure. Did you understand? You should say like that in an interview. This is the aim of this course. When I am doing this course, master course, I'm not just telling you simple books. I am telling you how to talk about these books. Did you understand? You should know why they are important. I have put only the main important things here. Did you understand, everyone? Are you enjoying this? I am trying to make you sound like real scholars. Not only to pass net and exams, set and net and exams like that. It is not enough that you know just facts. You know, in an interview or in the course of your career, it is not enough that you just know facts. You should be able to say, why is Saussure important? Why is Course in General Linguistics important? Why is this book different from any other book before it? Like that you should know. That is why we are doing this course. Okay. If you liked the video, please Press the like button, guys. Next is principles of literary criticism. Now, before I read out, let me ask you, why is principles of literary criticism important? Because principles of literary criticism by I.A. Richards, for the first time, brought into being the idea that what is important is what is inside the text, not outside. You have to look into the text. You don't have to look at the history. You don't have to look at the author's biography. You have to look at what is inside the text. Do close reading of the text. Don't look at what is outside the text. Did you understand? Principles of literary criticism. Dekho, I have put this thing here. Whenever I teach, try to watch on a laptop, okay? Because there will be lots of points on the slides. So, Principles of Literary Criticism and Practical Criticism, 2 books, 1924-29. They are companion volumes by I.A. Richards. What did he do? He developed literary formalism here. He developed literary formalism here. Now, listen to me, guys. Principles of Literary Criticism was based on experimental pedagogy. What do you mean by that? It means an innovation in teaching. Pedagogy means teaching. Experimental pedagogy means an innovation in teaching. Principles of Literary Criticism and Practical Criticism. These 2 works were based on experimental pedagogy. Clear? Experimental teaching. Richards would give students poems in which the titles and authors' names had been removed. He did not give the name of the poem. He did not give the name of the author. And without showing who the author is, without showing in which context this poem was written, he would just ask the students to talk about the books, the poems. And then he would use the students' responses for further development in their close reading skills. I.A. Richards developed the close reading skills of his students. Yes, Cambridge. Because I.A. Richards, F.R. Lewis and William Emerson were at Cambridge. Thus, till then, remember, in the time of Saussure, in the time of I.A. Richards, historical approach was prominent. When you talk about a book, you look at the history, you look at the context, you look at the author. I.A. Richards removed all those things. He said the books must be read by close reading, by looking at the individual components in the poem from a rigorous and scientific approach. He said that poems should be looked at internally. Look at the individual components in the poem and use a rigorous scientific approach. This became a very important feature of new criticism, a rigorous scientific approach. Later, John Crowe Ransom also advocated a rigorous scientific approach. I.A. Richards thought that literature is all about the experience of the reader. I.A. Richards gave importance to the experience of the reader. He gave importance to the way that the reader reacts to the text. And he explained it through psychology. He explained it through psychology because he thought that what is most important in the text is the experience of the reader. He thought that we can understand the text by looking at the psychology of the reader. Did you understand, everybody? Got it, everyone? Now, the next one is, ready for the next one? Ta-da-dang! Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics. And do you know the author, everyone? Who is the author of Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics? It is Fyodor Dostoevsky's Poetics. Who studied it is Mikhail Bakhtin. Mikhail Bakhtin talked about Dostoevsky's Poetics. Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics is a modern reinterpretation of poetics. You know, like Aristotle long ago talked about poetics. Here, this is Bakhtin. Mikhail Bakhtin also is reinterpreting poetics. He is defining poetics. Did you understand? It is a redefinition of poetics. It is considered to be a seminal work in Dostoevsky's studies Did you know there is something called Dostoevsky studies? And Bakhtin introduces a number of key concepts in this book, such as polyphony, carnivalization. You know this, right? I have discussed this later. Polyphony. What is polyphony? All of you are wondering. Polyphony literally means many voicedness. In a text, if all the characters speak their own language, in their own voices, without the author interfering, if all the characters speak whatever they want, then there is polyphony in the text. It is a polyphonic text. Did you understand? If all the writers, if all the characters in a text speak whatever they want, then it is a polyphonic text. Polyphony describes literary writing that managed to liberate the voice of its characters from the domination of the authorial or narratorial voice. Means what? The author's voice should not dominate. The narrator's voice should not dominate. The characters should be free to speak. That is polyphony. Did you understand, everyone? Polyphony means the character should be free to speak. The author's voice should not dominate. The character's voice also should be free to speak. The author's voice and narrator's voice should not dominate. Got it? That is polyphony. Then unfinalizability, another important concept from Bakhtin. Unfinalizability means a character in a novel should never be concretely finalized or completed. A character should not be finished. All characters should be incomplete. The text should not be finalized. Wow! You know, if your studies are not finalized, if you make mistakes, if everything you do is not perfect, don't worry, because it is characterized by unfinalizability. You should tell everybody, okay, I have not finished studying. I have not completed my work. I am yet to do and learn a lot of things. That's because of Bakhtin's unfinalizability. Will you remember? Unfinalizability means let characters and text be incomplete. You can never complete it. You understood? Then carnivalization. Carnivalization is a very famous concept. He introduced it here, discussed it in Rabelais and his world also. What is carnivalization? It refers to the transposition of the essential qualities of the carnival into the world of literary language and literary genre. Literary language means very strict, rigid. Literary language में सब कुछ ठीक होना चाहिए. There should be rules, there should be conformity. Carnivalization means playfulness, humor, laughter, everything is vulgarity. All this transposed into the literary genre, literary language. Do you know, when I teach, I am carnivalizing university teaching. University teaching is very serious. University teaching is fixed. It is very serious. It is, conforming to rules. But I try to carnivalize it with my gestures, with my unconventional style, with my unconventional examples. Did you understand? That is carnivalization. I'm doing all these gestures with my hand to show you how I am carnivalizing literary language. Did you understand? Another example. Tragedy is a serious genre. Tragedy is a serious genre. When Shakespeare uses fool and comic characters in tragedy, then he is carnivalizing it. Did you understand? He is carnivalizing it. Bakhtin also talked about Menippean satire. There are 3 kinds of satire, isn't it? What are the different kinds of satire? Juvenalian satire, then Horatian satire, Menippean satire or Varronian satire. What is Menippean satire? Bakhtin thought that Menippean satire is a genre that penetrates other genres. Menippean satire is playful, satirical, it is longer, it is about attitudes, not individual people. satirizing attitudes. It is there in tragedy, it is there in comedy, it is there everywhere in every genre. Menippean satire is capable of transforming itself. It penetrates other genres. Did you understand the point, guys? Talk to me. You're not saying anything. Say something in the chat box. Then Bakhtin also talked about double-voiced discourse. Double-voiced discourse matlab kya hai? It is also called polyphonic discourse. Double-voiced means directed both towards the referential object of speech and towards another's discourse. Means language and the main focus is there. At the same time, playfully, there is another focus. Probably an intertextual connection, probably an underlying meaning. Double-voiced means language is never plain like this. It is polyphonic. Even when I say one thing, I am also saying another thing. In language, even when I say one thing, I am also saying another thing. That is double-voiced discourse. Polyphony. One language is followed by another language. Language is never homogeneous. Language is never unitary. It is polyphonic. Did you understand, guys? So, that is Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics. Unfortunately, next book is also that I am discussing is also by Bakhtin. This is another photo of Bakhtin. Which photo did you like, guys? This photo? Yeah, this photo. One, option A, option B. Bolo? Which photo did you like? Option A, option B. Bolo? I am waiting. Bakhtin, you liked B? Okay. B looks like good boy. A looks like madman. Anna? See how I got you to interact? You were all quiet. And then I got you to interact. See? ठीक है. Rabelais and His World, 1940. It's a classic of Renaissance studies. Rabelais and His World is a classic of Renaissance studies. An important work in literary studies and cultural interpretation. Rabelais and His World is about culture as well as literature. Bakhtin identifies two concepts here. I forgot to mark. Is my marking helping you, guys? Is my marking helping you? There are two concepts he talks about. Carnival and grotesque realism. Rabelais and His World, Bakhtin talks about two concepts. One is carnival and Rabelais and His World. And grotesque realism. Okay, so let us talk about Bakhtin's Rabelais and His words. Bakhtin removes Rabelais. Look at this. Bakhtin removes Rabelais from the framework of official culture and mainstream great French literature. Bakhtin is placing Rabelais not in mainstream French literature, official culture. Instead, Bakhtin is looking at the folk humor in Rabelais. Bakhtin is looking at the folk humor, the rich and varied history of folk humor. That is what Bakhtin is talking about. Bakhtin says Rabelais represents, in Rabelais and His World, Bakhtin says Rabelais represents not mainstream French literature, mainstream values, official culture. No. Bakhtin says Rabelais represents folk humor. He talks about what is called Rabelaisian laughter. He talks about Rabelaisian laughter. He says Rabelaisian laughter is rooted in ancient ritual and spectacle. Rabelaisian laughter is rooted in ancient ritual and spectacle. it is not about mainstream values, but folk culture, ordinary people's values, mainstream culture नहीं है. फिर क्या है? Ritual and spectacle, all these things in Rabelais he is accentuating. Oral tradition, these are all marginal things. Did you understand? He is looking at Rabelais not as a mainstream writer, but as a marginal writer. Elements of the margins, oral tradition, ritual and spectacle, and folk humor, all these things in Rabelais, Bakhtin is talking about. The grotesque means excessive. All these things are bordering on the grotesque, excessive, repulsive images of the human body. The grotesque, repulsive, excessive images of the human body that you have in Gargantua and Pantagruel. That is Rabelais' famous book, Gargantua and Pantagruel. Bakhtin is studying these excessive, grotesque images in Gargantua and Pantagruel. Did you know Gargantua and Pantagruel are two giants? They are doing horrible things in that book. Did you understand? They urinate and drown a village. They pass urine and drown a village. Things like that they do. Bakhtin understands such horrible, grotesque, excessive images as deeply positive reflections of the material bodily principle. Bakhtin gave importance to the body. Bakhtin understood that the body is important. Death and life are coexisting. Folk culture, oral culture, all these things are important. He is looking at all the grotesque, horrible, satirical, excessive, repulsive images in Rabelais. Clear, everybody? Thus he is defining carnivalesque. Bakhtin points out that Rabelais' exceptional linguistic freedom. So another point is linguistic freedom. In Rabelais, there is linguistic freedom. It coincided with the Renaissance struggle. At that time, in the Renaissance period, when Rabelais is writing, there is a struggle between many languages, many jargons, many dialects. Renaissance was a very multicultural period. So many people traveling, going up and down, so many new things happening. And in such a Renaissance period, Bakhtin's language, Bakhtin's style, Bakhtin's carnivalesque elements is a representation of the age itself. Will you remember, guys? So, the Bakhtin's language, Bakhtin's book, Rabelais and His Worlds, Bakhtin's book, Rabelais and His World, discusses carnivalesque, and he talks about how Rabelais showed the margins, the power of the margins, the power of the powerless people. Clear? That is Rabelais and His Worlds. Now, the New Criticism by John Crowe Ransom. The New Criticism by John Crowe Ransom is a very important book, especially because that book gave the movement New Criticism its name. The name New Criticism came from John Crowe Ransom's book, The New Criticism. This book asserts that the text is the focus of close reading. He asserted closed reading. Text like I.A. Richards before, remember? Like I.A. Richards, John Crowe Ransom also says there should be close reading of the text. Suppose this is a text. I should do close reading of the text, looking at all the devices in the text. Remember yesterday we talked about the devices. You look at all the devices in the text. You close read the text without looking at anything outside it. When you write exam, examiner will say, do close reading. Don't look at other things outside the text. Don't look at your neighbor's paper. Don't look at any other paper. Do close reading only. Clear? Close reading means look at what is inside the text. What do you mean, Suprabha? This is literary theory classic. So many questions will come. Very important. Any of these authors, all of them have been asked. Very, very important. Now, you should look at what is inside the text. Sometimes majority of questions will come from theory only in some exams. Words on the page. For GATE exam also, you will immensely benefit from this. Words on the page. Always they ask from new criticism in GATE net set. New criticism says that we should focus on the words on the page. And analysis of the text should be scientific and precise. Analysis of the text should be scientific and precise. You should do scientific study of the text, precise study of the text. Reject. He rejected what all? Personal, historical, moral and biographical details. He did not look at historical detail. He did not look at moral detail. He did not look at biographical detail because he did only close reading. So in other words, new criticism focused on the purity of the text. What is important is purity of the text and purity of the act of reading. Okay, Suprabha, please study all these authors. Okay, Suprabha, there will definitely be questions. New criticism focused on the purity of the text and purity of the act of reading, and the text becomes significant for the sake of itself. The text becomes significant because of itself, not because of anything that lies outside the text. Clear, guys? Now, the second sex, 1949. This was 1941. Next book is 1949. The second sex. Yes, Paban present. The second sex is a 1949 book by the French existentialist Simone de Beauvoir, in which the author discusses the treatment of women throughout history. Treatment of women is discussed, and that too in history. The main thesis of the second sex. What is the main thing in second sex? Second sex revolves around the idea that women have been held in a relationship of oppression to man. Women have been oppressed. Women have been considered man's other. Women have been oppressed and women have been considered man's other. Clear? The second sex argues that either or frame of the woman question. Either women are equal or they are different. That is what is called either or frame. She talked about either or frame. That is, either women are equal or they are different. She argues against it. She says that don't consider women as either equal or different. We are human beings. We are like men. She argues for women's equality. She argues for women's equality and insists that the sexual difference is real. She talks about sexual difference. So which of the following is not a point of discussion in second sex? Like that questions can come. Did you understand? What does Simone de Beauvoir mean by either or woman question? Like that they can be asked. They can ask. What is the main thesis or main argument in second sex? That they can ask. So there are many possibilities. Now the insistence of the letter and the unconscious or reason since Freud. Many of you might know this is a very, very, very major book that laid the foundations of post-structuralist psychoanalysis, written by Jacques Lacan. Jacques Lacan wrote The Insistence of the Letter in the Unconscious. It is a path-breaking essay by Jacques Lacan. Now, it is originally delivered as a talk. It was by Lacan, originally delivered as a talk on May 9, 1957, and later published in Lacan's book, Écrits. Lacan was such a major thinker and theorist, but Lacan's only one book was published in his lifetime, Écrits. Got it, guys? Now, Lacan argues, what does he argue? That subconscious is structured like language through chains of signification. He says the unconscious or subconscious is structured like language through chains of signification. Will you remember? The unconscious is not merely the seat of instincts. He uses the word letter to show how the subject borrows from language. We are always borrowing from language. Our unconscious is structured like a language. Letter, the word in the title, denotes how the self borrows from language. I have become a self or an individual because of how I borrow from language. Language and the unconscious are inextricably connected. Language and its structure exist prior to our selfhood. Our selfhood comes later. Language exists first. Before we get a sense of our identity, what is there is language. Language exists prior to the self. Did you understand, everybody? The unconscious is structured like a language. I am teaching you these very major theory classics in a simple manner. Please use it well. You don't have to go around asking people, give me theory material. When they ask from theory a lot in exams, they do ask, yes, all of you know. You don't have to go telling everybody, oh, it was difficult exam. This time your exam is going to be easy because you should study all these major texts. Now, structure, sign and play in the discourse of the human sciences. It is a 1966 essay by this handsome man. Who is that? Jacques Derrida. Structure, sign and play was actually a lecture that Jacques Derrida originally gave at Johns Hopkins University. He went for a conference there in October 1966. In October 1966, he went for a conference there. And it critically engages with structuralism. Critically engages with structuralism, matlab kya hai? Critically engages with structuralism means he questions the ideas of structuralism. He questions the presumptions of structuralism. Clear? The lecture was then published as a chapter, as chapter 10 of Writing and Difference. It became a part of the book Writing and Difference. Here, Derrida examines the concept of structure. Derrida is examining the concept of structure here. What is structure? Okay? He's examining the concept of structure and engages with its politics. The politics of the word he engages with. And he problematizes the concept of structure. He is questioning the concept of structure. He says such a concept cannot be accepted because structure contains a center, a paradoxical idea of center which escapes structurality. For example, classroom. Let me give you an example. Take a classroom. Classroom has a structure. Classroom has a structure. The center of the classroom is the teacher. Henna. And now the problem is that the classroom, the structure of the classroom depends on the teacher, the center, and that teacher herself escapes structurality. The teacher cannot be controlled by the rules of the structure. You know, in the classroom, teacher says you should not speak, but teacher herself will speak. In the classroom, teacher says you should not go out in between, but if necessary, teacher will go out in between. So, what is the meaning? The center escapes structurality. Structurally, wrongly I wrote. The center escapes structurality. The center cannot be the center. The center is problematized by Derrida. Did you get it, guys? If you have doubts, you should ask me, okay? And Derrida based his theories on Nietzsche, Freud and Heidegger. Derrida based his theory in structure, sign and play on Nietzsche, Freud and Heidegger. And he discusses very importantly an event. What is event? An event that leads to disruption of the structure, which is called rupture. What is it? It is actually decentering. Rupture or event, what he says, is actually another word for decentering. The event is called rupture or it is decentering. He says that in this universe, in this world, there is a decentering that is going to happen. All centers are going to fall apart. That is the event that Derrida talked about. Got it, everybody? Did you get the main points? Are you enjoying? Tell me something. Now, of Grammatology, again by Jacques Derrida. Wow, is he a model or what? He looks like a model. Anyway, of Grammatology is one of the 3 books that Derrida published in 1967. In 1967, Derrida published 3 books. What are they? Of Grammatology, Writing and Difference, Speech and Phenomena. Of Grammatology, Writing and Difference, Speech and Phenomena. Yeah, Grammatology, what do you mean by that? This book of Grammatology established deconstruction. No, first he wrote it in 66 and then published it in 67. I'll do one thing, I'll make it 67 to avoid confusion. One of the 3 books Derrida published in 67, I wrote here. That's why. So, Grammatology is a scientific study of writing. Grammatology is the scientific study of writing systems. How writing happens, that is grammatology. It is a method of investigating the origins of language. Grammatology is about origins of language that enables our concepts of writing. How are we writing? Why are we writing like this? What originated writing? Derrida is talking about all this to become as comprehensive as our concepts of speech. He is studying speech and writing. And an important point Derrida makes is that, I forgot to mark, Grammatology, scientific study of writing systems, investigating the origin of language. Got it, guys? Jacques Derrida, deconstructive practice. An important point that he made is language gets in the way of what we are trying to say. Language is insufficient. Language does not help us speak everything. Yes, it was translated by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Derrida coined a famous phrase, signifier of the signifier. That means there is no signified. What do you mean by signifier of the signifier? It means there is no signified, there are only signifiers. When you see one signified, that signified also becomes a signifier. He is questioning what is meant by the language we use. Why are we using language? There are only signifiers here. This means that structuralism uses signifiers to point to other signifiers. One signifier leads to another signifier. When this happens, there is nothing signified. No final meaning, correct? There is no meaning behind what is being said. Got it, everybody? So that is of grammatology. Now, the death of the author. The death of the author also came at about the same time, and the death of the author is written by our Roland Barthes. In his essay, Barthes argues against the method of reading and criticism that relies on aspects of an author's identity. He is against an author's identity. Reading a text based on the author's identity, he is against. Roland Barthes does not like reading based on an author's identity. In this type of criticism, against which he argues, the experiences and biases of the author serve as a definitive explanation of the text. The text becomes an explanation of the author's aims, intentions. Roland Barthes is against it. Roland Barthes says the author is a scripter who simply collects pre-existing quotations. He is collecting pre-existing quotations. Every text is based on other texts. No text is original. All texts. Of course, all these are important. That is why I am talking about it. That is why I am saying this is important. I am not talking about unimportant books at all. They are all path-breaking books. If you don't know any one of these books, you should not be a postgraduate. It's like that. They are so important and basic to our understanding. Now, the author is a scripter who is only collecting pre-existing quotations. This is the basis of the idea of intertextuality. Roland Barthes' student Julia Kristeva talked about intertextuality. She was the one who coined the term intertextuality. The task of meaning is not with the author. It falls in the destination. Who is the destination? The reader. Meaning lies in not the origin or author, but in its destination or reader. Got it, everyone? That is the book, The Death of the Author. Now I put so many points here. You will be bored to listen to all this now. I will edit a little bit. Ta-da-dang. All right, I edited. Now it is less, easier for you. The structural transformation of the public sphere is written by the prominent Frankfurt School theorist Jürgen Habermas. The structural transformation of the public sphere, an inquiry into a category of bourgeois society. That is the full title. The bourgeois public sphere may be conceived above all as a sphere of private people coming together as a public. You know, in the modern times, from the 18th century, modernity began in the 18th century. From the modern times, middle class people who began to read newspapers, etc., they came together to discuss politics, to discuss certain aspects of society, and they began to share their opinions. This is called public sphere. The clubs and coffee houses, the newspapers, periodicals, today the social media, all this is public sphere. They have already asked about public sphere in net. The bourgeois public sphere is the sphere where private people come together as public. The public sphere is seen as a domain of social life where public opinion can be formed. Structural transformation is there in the title. What do you mean by structural transformation? The process by which the public sphere shifts from being the center of rational critical debate. There is a change today. I will explain first and then you will understand. Jürgen Habermas is saying, in the beginning, in the 18th century, public sphere was very strong. Bourgeois people came together and formed their public opinion. But today, with the rise of capitalism, public sphere has changed a lot. Public sphere, because of consumerism, because of capitalism, public sphere has collapsed. And public sphere is now controlled by the government. Today also we know government controls social media. We are not free. We are not supposed to say whatever we want in social media. Government controls it. So, in Habermas's view, there has been a big change, a deterioration in the value of public sphere. The range of public sphere is now limited. We are more controlled. Clear, everyone? That is Habermas's The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere. Now, Sexual Politics. 1970 book by American writer, sculptor, activist Kate Millett. And it was based on her PhD dissertation. The book is an analysis of patriarchal power. Millett developed the notion that men have institutionalized power over women. Man's power has become institutionalized because of its politics, because of its power. Power has a political aspect. She famously said, sex has a frequently neglected political aspect. And this power of patriarchy is socially constructed. You know, the power of patriarchy is socially constructed. The term sexual politics was defined by Kate Millett as encompassing the contestation of power-structured relationships. The term sexual politics was defined by Kate Millett as encompassing the contestation of power-structured relationships with respect to sex, gender, and sexuality, and in relation to the social system of patriarchy. How she is contesting power-structured relationships. That is what is important in sexual politics. Sex has a frequently neglected political aspect, and she's talking about the power-structured relationships pertaining to sexuality. Is that clear? Sexual Politics, 1970 book by Kate Millett. She's talking about how power works through sexuality. Clear, guys? Sexual Politics, 1970. Discipline and Punish. Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison, is a 1975 book by French philosopher Michel Foucault. The Discipline and Punish is also subtitled The Birth of the Prison. This book is an analysis of the social and theoretical mechanisms behind the changes that occurred in Western penal systems. Western penal system means prisons of West. In Western prisons, what are the changes that came into being? In Western prisons, what are the changes that came into being? And what are the socio-political mechanisms behind these changes? That is what Foucault is talking about. He is talking about the relationship between power and knowledge. Here also, he talks about power, knowledge. Discipline and Punish talks about how power is reorganized to form punishment. How power is reorganized to form punishment. What you see in prisons, what you see as power in prisons is not a great thing. Various bodies of knowledge are also associated with this power. Knowledge and power are related. Even in prisons, there is some knowledge that connects us to control, surveillance. Did you understand? Such kind of surveillance and control is there in, say, psychiatry, gynecology, or whatever psychiatry, gynecology, etc. say as great knowledges are actually ways to control us. Did you understand? That is Foucault's Discipline and Punish. Are you bored, guys? Are you bored? In Discipline and Punish itself, I told you, I didn't tell you. I just mentioned it. I didn't show it here. It is in Panopticon also here. I will say here. He also discussed the concept of Panopticon or carceral prisons, carceral archipelagos. Yeah. Now, the postmodern condition by François Lyotard. Jean-François Lyotard analyzes the notion of knowledge. He analyzes the notion of knowledge in postmodern society. And he says, in postmodern society, there is the end of grand narratives or meta-narratives. He said, there is the end of grand narratives or meta-narratives. He famously said, postmodernism is incredulity towards meta-narratives. Postmodernism is incredulity towards meta-narratives. That means postmodernism does not believe in meta-narratives. What are meta-narratives? You want me to explain prison knowledge? You know, in prison, there is a lot of discipline. I will explain. Listen. In prisons, there are lots of discipline. Prisoners are taught a lot of things. You should get up very early in the morning. Okay? Prisoners can't sleep till noon. They have to get up very early in the morning. Then they have to do exercise. Then they have to do some work, constructive work. Then they should eat very minimal food. Foucault lists out all these disciplinary actions and knowledges that are part of prison. The legal system contains a lot of presumptions of what is knowledge, what is good. And Foucault is looking at how these knowledges are infiltrated into prisoners' lives, how they are disseminated in prisoners' lives as a means of controlling them. Did you understand? He has written in if you read, you will understand. He's written in very great detail about the everyday life in prisons. In the past, how it was, now how it is changing, and how it denotes more than just prison. It is more about knowledge, power, and other things in the society. Now, what are meta-narratives, I was asking. Meta-narratives are rational, overarching accounts of how the world is or ought to be. Meta-narratives are grand stories about how the world ought to be. From the Enlightenment period, thinkers have been defining meta-narratives or grand stories of society in a certain way. India is my country, all Indians are my brothers and sisters. That is a meta-narrative. Did you understand? Postmodernism criticizes and disbelieves in meta-narratives. Postmodernism is incredulity towards meta-narratives. What is the alternative then? It is mini narrative, local narrative, or petit récit. Mini narrative, local narrative, or petit récit. This is the alternative. Will you remember, guys? Then Simulacra and Simulation is a 1981 philosophical treatise by the philosopher Jean Baudrillard. It is a philosophical treatise. 1981 treatise. Will you remember? Simulations and Simulacra. Here the author examines symbols, signs, how they relate to contemporaneity. He talks about symbols, signs, and how they relate to contemporaneity. Baudrillard claims that our current society has replaced all reality and meaning with symbols and signs. And human experience is a simulation of reality. Reality doesn't exist anymore. Reality is now hyper-reality. He talked about how our culture is moving towards hyper-reality. Simulacra are copies or representations. Simulation is the imitation of a real world process. What is there in real world is imitated. Then it is called simulation. Hyper-reality is an inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from simulation. You don't distinguish between reality and simulation. Then it is called hyper-reality. Did you understand? These are the three important words. Historiographic metafiction. Did you know the subtitle? Parody and the intertextuality of history. Historiographic metafiction, parody and the intertextuality of history. The term historiographic metafiction was coined by Linda Hutcheon in her essay, Beginning to Theorize the Postmodern. Then she wrote another essay, another book, A Poetics of Postmodernism. In both these works, she discussed what is historiographic metafiction. What is historiographic metafiction? It is history that is self-consciously treated. Poetics of Postmodern. Can you see the screen, guys? History is self-consciously treated as a subjective account, which includes deliberate, ironical, and playful changes. Deliberate, ironical, and playful changes. The result is fictionalization of history. The result is fictionalization of history. History is a construction. Historiographic metafiction is particularly doubled. Doubling is something happens in historiographic metafiction. What do you mean by that? It means it contains both historical and literary intertexts. Doubling means it contains both historical and literary intertexts. History plus literature, that is historiographic metafiction. Like Midnight's Children, Michael Ondaatje's English Patient, these are examples of historiographic metafiction. Did you get it, guys? Did you like the video? Now, Postmodernism or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism. It is a book by Frederick Jameson, in which the author offers a critique of modernism and postmodernism from a Marxist perspective. Will you remember? A critique of modernism and postmodernism from a Marxist perspective. Frederick Jameson is both postmodernist and Marxist. The book began as an article in New Left Review. Will you remember, guys? Jameson understands late capitalism as the pervasive condition of our own age. Late capitalism is the pervasive condition of our own age. A condition of our own age means postmodern age. What late conveys is that something has changed. Something has changed, that is the meaning. That things are different. That we have gone through a transformation of the life. He characterizes the postmodern mode of production. What are you saying, Angshika? These are all chapters only, and sometimes it is not enough to read one chapter. This is only an essay that I am talking about. It's not a big book. It's an essay, but it's a book. But it's a book that you should read. It's it's like an essay. He characterizes the postmodern mode of production as cultural dominant. Postmodern mode of production is a dominant aspect. Are you following? Postmodern mode of production is Jameson's term, cultural dominant. Cultural dominant is an important term. And in postmodernism, there is mass production. In mass production, there is depthlessness. That's another important term by Frederick Jameson. Cultural dominant and depthlessness, very important terms by Frederick Jameson. And he says cognitive mapping, another very important term from Frederick Jameson is cognitive mapping. What is that? A process by which the individual subject situates himself within a vaster, unpresentable totality. Cognitive mapping means a process by which the individual subject is presented within a totality. Clear? We are presented within a mass-produced culture. We are put within a mass-produced culture corresponding to ideology. That is called cognitive mapping. How to place the individual within a totality of mass production, of capitalism, of ideology. That is what is called cognitive mapping of Frederick Jameson. Okay. Next is Laugh of the Medusa. What are you asking? Important chapters. I can't say because I told you they are all, this is an essay, for example. There is no chapter. And P.K. Nair and Peter Barry. P.K. Nair probably. Either is okay. I have made a book collecting important points from P.K. Nair, Peter Barry, M.A.R. Habib, and all the Raman Selden, because all these books have slightly different points. So I made a book collecting all the points from there, because that is how you should study. One book alone may not give you all the points. Always you should study different books. If you ask me which of these two, I will only say both. Because both of these have different points. General aptitude paper, reading comprehension ka only one solution you have to read. The more you read, the easier it becomes. Reading comprehension is easy to master. Only thing from now on, every day do half an hour reading of important books. The Laugh of the Medusa is an essay by Hélène Cixous, originally written in French. And it is here that she first talked about l'écriture féminine, or women's writing. Feminine writing, or écriture féminine. Her main point is that women should pursue writing despite attempts to drive them away from the fields. Women should continue to write. The term Laugh of the Medusa, what does it mean? It means the successful creation of a writing style that allows women to claim authority. Laugh of the Medusa means a successful creation of a writing style that allows women to claim authority because it was created on the foundation of a woman's claim to herself and her body. Women's language should be based in her identity, her body, and women should successfully create her own style. Then that is the term indicated by Laugh of the Medusa. Woman becomes powerful. Eliminate patriarchy, develop your own style, and claim your own body and self. That is the meaning of Laugh of the Medusa. Now, A Literature of Their Own is an important book by Elaine Showalter. Did you know Elaine Showalter took the title of this book from John Stuart Mill? Elaine Showalter took the title of A Literature of Their Own from John Stuart Mill. And the book is subtitled British Women Novelists from Bronte to Lessing. British women novelists from Bronte to Lessing. What is Kate Miller doing here? She is uncovering the long but neglected tradition of women writers in England. She is revealing the long tradition of women writers in England. Showalter's analysis includes both minor novelists as well as major novelists. Did you understand, guys? Showalter talks about all kinds of novelists here, and it traces similarities in female literary subculture. Female subculture. Then Gender Trouble, 1990. Feminism and the Subversion of Identity. That is the subtitle. Book by Judith Butler, where she talked about performativity, as you know. Gender is a kind of improvised performance. Gender, according to Butler, is not tied to material bodily facts. Gender is not about material bodily facts. Gender is a social construction. Gender is a fiction, open to change and contestation. Will you remember? Gender is a fiction, open to change and contestation. Gender performativity theory is what she coined, what she developed. How social performances in everyday life are actually performances of gender. Social performances in everyday life are ultimately how you do your hair, what clothes you wear, how you do your daily things, your behavior. All these are aspects of gender performativity. Clear, everybody? Next, Black Skin, White Masks. As all of you know, it is by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique. And here in Black, it was his first book. His most major book, famous book, is The Wretched of the Earth. Black Skin, White Mask was his early book, and it was followed by The Wretched of the Earth. Black Skin, White Mask applies a historical critique of the ways in which identity, particularly blackness, is constructed. Identity, particularly blackness, is constructed and propagated. How is it done? The construction of identity, that is the theme of Black Skin, White Masks. He titled it Black Skin, White Masks to show that the color of the skin defines people's cultural identity. You know, it is a very provocative statement for the Ordinary black people, for the ordinary people it is skin, but for white people it is mask. See, for white people it is not skin, it is only a mask. This is a provocative statement. A provocative statement that summarizes Frantz Fanon's key message in the book. The book discusses racial inferiority, and it is based on the people called Antillians. At that time, France was ruling Caribbean, and France ruled over the Antillians. Did you understand? France at that time ruled over the Antillians. It was a French colony. And he's talking about those people, how they internalized racial inferiority. Got it, everyone? Black skin, white masks. Next book we will talk about is Culture and Imperialism by Edward Said. As all of you know, Edward Said is famous for Orientalism. Culture and Imperialism is the sequel to Orientalism. Culture and Imperialism is the sequel. Culture and Imperialism is a collection of essays that traces the connection between imperialism and culture throughout the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. Culture is the identification of a country. Imperialism, on the other hand, is no more than greed for power, resources and lands. So culture is the identification of a country, he says. A country is identified by its culture. Are you following me, guys? Imperialism is nothing but greed for power, resources and land, and it ruins culture. Culture is what identifies a country. Imperialism ruins culture. Imperialism means greed. This is the main argument. In this book, remember, he talks about Mansfield Park. He gives a study of Mansfield Park in this book. The book examines, Culture and Imperialism examines how literature has reflected and bolstered British, French and US imperialisms. Literature supports imperialism. I will just make it simple. How literature supports imperialism, he talks about. Literature like Mansfield Park, etc. are literary works that engage in imperialism using self-justifying rhetoric. What did Gayatri Spivak call this? She called it worlding. This self-justifying rhetoric that Said talks about, Gayatri Spivak calls it worlding. What do you mean by that term by Gayatri Spivak? Worlding means great literature, masterpieces of literature will naturalize oppression and imperialism. Great literature naturalizes oppression and imperialism, makes it look like imperialism is okay. Did you understand? That is worlding. That is Gayatri Spivak's term. This is Edward Said. Edward Said examines how literature supports imperialism, how the self-justifying rhetoric of literature condones the West dominance and exploitation of non-Western people, how Western language supports domination of non-Western people by presenting the non-Western people as no good, by presenting the white people as the only people with progress and ideas and power. Western literature actually supports imperialism. Did you understand the main argument, guys? Is it clear? Talk to me. Now, Of Mimicry and Man, a very important book by Homi K. Bhabha. Of Mimicry and Man lays out Homi K. Bhabha's concept of mimicry. There are very important essays in this book. Colonialism results in irony, mimicry and repetition. This is his main idea. Homi K. Bhabha says that colonialism results in irony. Colonialism leads to irony, mimicry and repetition. Bhabha's essential argument is that mimicry can become unintentionally subversive. Though the colonized in the process of mimicry. What is mimicry? Mimicry is imitation. Imitation becomes subversive. How? See, I am a colonized person. I am speaking colonizer's language. When I speak English, it is mimicry. But it also becomes subversive because it is like Caliban speaking Prospero's language. When Caliban speaks Prospero's language, he is subverting the language. And also, Prospero becomes powerful only because Caliban speaks Prospero's language. Like that, Robinson Crusoe teaches Friday to speak in English. The colonizers need the colonized people to speak in colonizer's language. Only then the colonizer will have power. Did you understand? Bhabha's essential argument is that mimicry is subversive. That is the main argument. Though the colonized in the process of mimicry rarely realizes that he is undermining the power systems of the colonizer. When you wear jeans, you are actually weakening the colonizer. When you speak English, you are weakening the colonizer, even though you don't realize it. You wear jeans and want to speak English because you think the colonizer is powerful. I want to dress like them, I want to speak like them. That is what you're thinking. But actually, it shows that the colonizer is weak. Clear? This idea is what he discusses in Of Mimicry and Man. Then there is Ijaz Ahmad. Ijaz Ahmad's In Theory is an important book. Professor Ijaz Ahmad, renowned cultural theorist. He was against he is also a Marxist, by the way. He was against the growing tendency to homogenize third world literature and cultures. He did not want the West to homogenize third world literature. He wanted to talk about the heterogeneity of third world. He wanted to say that third world is plural. He wanted to show that we can't be fixed into one mold. All of third world is not the same. That is what the meaning of saying he was against homogenization of the third world. The book discusses the role of theory and theorists in the movement against colonialism and imperialism. The book In Theory by Ijaz Ahmad discusses the role of theory and theorists. This book questions whether theory and theorists can do anything against colonialism and imperialism. He argues that post-structuralism and postmodernism have accomplished very little. He is criticizing literary theory. He says literary theories have not attained much. So he discusses the role of theory and theorists. And he says post-structuralism and postmodernism accomplished very little. The book contains a critique of Frederick Jameson's third world literature in the era of multinational capitalism. Third world literature, Frederick Jameson is homogenizing the third world there, he thought. Ijaz Ahmad critiqued Frederick Jameson's third world literature in the era of multinational capitalism. They might ask you about who wrote third world literature in the era of multinational capitalism. It is Frederick Jameson. Did you understand? Clear, everyone? So, with that, we have come to the end of this session on literary theory. Let me just recap. In Theory by Ijaz Ahmad is a Marxist perspective of third world literature. Of Mimicry and Man argues that mimicry is inevitably happening in literature and post-colonial cultures, but it is subversive. Mimicry is subversive. Culture and Imperialism says that literature supports imperialism. Did you understand? Literature is ultimately, mainstream literature is ultimately supporting imperialism. Black Skin White Mask says that the color of the skin seems to define people's identity. Racial inferiority is internalized by the blacks. The blacks internalize racial inferiority. In Gender Trouble, Judith Butler says that gender is essentially a construct, and it is changing, and it is essentially a performance. Gender is a performance. We are performing gender through our daily activities. In a literature of their own, Elaine Showalter studies the women novelists of the 19th century till the middle of the 20th century, and she brings out their women's writing traditions. A female literary subculture she talked about. Female literary subculture. In Elaine Sisou's Laugh of the Medusa, she talks about feminine writing or l'écriture féminine. And she, through the title, she showed that women can successfully create women's language and women's style. Postmodernism and the late cultural logic of late capitalism by Frederick Jameson. It is also a Marxist critique of postmodernism. He shows that late capitalism is a pervasive condition of depthlessness. In late capitalism, where everything is mass produced, we have depthlessness. Clear, everybody? He talked about depthlessness and placing the individual within a society, a mass-produced society, within the context of mass production. That is called cognitive mapping. Frederick Jameson's cognitive mapping. Historiographic metafiction is the blending of history, ideology, and fiction. Those non-fiction works that blend history, ideology, and fiction, they are called historiographic metafiction. Effectively, this theory shows that history is a construction. The theory of historiographic metafiction shows that history is a construction. Then, Simulacra and Simulation by Jean Baudrillard says that in this postmodern society, we have lost the capacity to distinguish between the real and the artificial. Okay? We don't know what is real and what is artificial. Thus, we live in a state of hyper-reality, which is dominated by simulations and simulacra. That means representations. The real has disappeared. We have only representations. Is this recap helping you guys? Is this recap, when I talk in nutshell like this, is it helping you? Some of you might have joined late. That is why I am doing this recap. The postmodern condition by Francois Lyotard is against meta-narratives. And Lyotard says that postmodernism disbelieves in meta-narratives and supports mini-narratives. Meta-narratives are rational, overarching statements about the world. Postmodernism does not believe in them. Postmodernism believes in mini-narratives. In Discipline and Punish, Foucault talks about how Western legal systems or penal systems, prison systems, are actually based on power-knowledge dichotomy. The changes that he's studying, the changes that occurred in prisons, and looking at how the practices in a prison denote power and knowledge. You know what prisoners are doing? Discipline. They are being disciplined. They are being taught the values of an unmaterialistic life, a simple life. They are being taught the values of cooperation. You know, that is what prisons are about, presumably. These are all actually ways to control the people and subject them to submission. Then the Sexual Politics by Kate Millett shows that power is institutionalized in sexuality. Sexuality has a certain power. Sexuality encompasses power-structured relationships. The structural transformation of the public sphere. Jürgen Habermas talked about how there was a public sphere that was formed in the 18th century because of the coming of private people getting together to discuss, and this eventually influenced the political setup, the government. But today, there has been a structural transformation of the public sphere. That means public sphere has changed because of capitalism. Public sphere has changed because of consumerism. People are no longer concerned about politics. They are only concerned about consumption. People are concerned only about consumption. So public sphere has completely changed these days. The Death of the Author by Roland Barthes says that the author's identity should not be the basis for judging a work. The author's identity it should not be the basis for reading a work. The author is only a scripter, and every text is a set of quotations from other books. What the meaning of the text is ultimately not the origin or the author, but the destination or the reader. The origin of a text is the meaning of a text is not the origin, but the destination. Of Grammatology by Derrida talks about writing and speech. It is a scientific study of writing systems and shows that language is incapable of carrying our intentions. Language is unsuitable. Language does not convey anything properly. That is the meaning. There are only signifiers in language without signifieds. There are only signifiers without signifieds. Structure, sign and play in the discourse of the human sciences talks about structure. He says the structure is a problematic concept because the structure is based on a center that escapes structurality. And in Structure, Sign and Play, he discusses an event or a rupture or a epistemological rupture or a shift, which is nothing but decentering. He's talking about decentering here. The insistence of the letter in the unconscious was a talk given by Jacques Lacan showing the importance of language in the unconscious. He is trying to show that the unconscious is completely dependent on the letter or language. The second sex is about women's perception as other in history. Women are always oppressed and marginalized as the other in history. She says, Simone de Beauvoir says that women should not be considered equal or different. We should accept that sexual differences are there. Women are also human beings who cannot be really compared to men. They are independent. The New Criticism by John Crowe Ransom established ontological criticism, which is a scientific approach to criticism, to literature itself. You should study literature, not about literature. And the New Criticism is a series of essays that justifies or illustrates the practice of close reading. He emphasized the purity of the text and the purity of the act of reading. Rabelais and His Worlds is a book where Bakhtin places Rabelais not within mainstream culture and official culture, but within marginal, ritualistic folk culture. He connects repulsive, grotesque, excessive body images and folk humor, Rabelaisian laughter with liberation. You know, there was a lot of liberation from mainstream centers in the Renaissance period when Rabelais lived. In the Renaissance period, there was a playful conflict of many languages, idioms, dialects, etc., which are illustrated in Rabelais' linguistic freedom. Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics is a book by Bakhtin that discusses many of the ideas of Bakhtin, like polyphony or many-voicedness, let all the characters speak for themselves, unfinalizability, that means nothing is complete, nothing is fully formed, carnivalization, that means the literary language or literary genres rules are breaking up and the carnival is entering literature. Menippean satire as penetrating other genres. And he also talked about double-voiced discourse. Of course, there is another term, heteroglossia, that is not actually discussed here in this book. Principles of Literary Criticism by I.A. Richards and Practical Criticism by I.A. Richards established the technique of practical criticism or formalism, which eventually joined hands with New Criticism. He started close reading here by practicing it in classrooms with his students. He focused on the experience of the reader, which is actually later rejected by new critics in affective fallacy. Then Course in General Linguistics, originally written in French, compiled by Charles Bolley and Albert Shehai, are lectures by Ferdinand de Saussure delivered at the University of Geneva. He rejected historical linguistics, brought in synchronic linguistics, and laid the foundations of a new science called semiology. All these are extremely important ideas in structuralism later. Structuralism came much later, not at this time, but it was inspired by the works of ideas of Ferdinand de Saussure. And lastly, psychology of the unconscious. Psychology of the unconscious means Carl Jung's idea that our unconscious is a storehouse of repressed memories which ultimately form our collective unconscious. And collective unconscious is the repertoire of archetypes. Our collective unconscious is based on archetypes. He also differed from Freud in his idea of sexuality. He said libido is psychic, not just sexual. That brings us to the end of this session on theory classics. I did this session because literary theory questions in exams are not only about concepts, they are about authors and works also, more and more so. This session will help you immensely in GATE and NET and SET. I think people don't understand the value of discussing these things, so very few people attend, but that's okay. You people who attended have learned. Please read on your own, and probably the others will attend later. They will watch the video later, I don't know. Anyway, please make it a point to read extra, and that will amazingly help you in your career as well as in your exams. Okay, thank you very much for joining me. If you liked the session, please click the like button and let me know how you fared. I mean, how was it, this experience of talking about theory classics? And bye-bye. If you liked it, please, I am eager to hear it from you. So I hope you're all there in our Telegram groups. Meet you there. Bye-bye.